experience with other communities who have worked with this as to, are there certain parameters they try to keep these dollars around so that it doesn't raise a lot of concern? I mean, you're trying to do a good thing, but a good thing can backfire.
I guess to answer your question is the total tax rate is what you want to look at. And the tax rate that was levied for bonds in 2010 is 13 cents. And if the district does go ahead with a $750,000 abatement, the tax rate for bonds will be 12 cents. And then it will go up 12 cents the following year if there's no abatement. So I guess to answer your question, it's something you have to think about. Do you do it all in 1 year? If you're only going to do, for example, if you have $750,000, do you go ahead and abate all of that now? You just want to be mindful of the increase the next year.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's almost more of a question for us in terms of our ability to fund future abatements.
Right, whether we'll be able to keep any of this trend,
right.
And what impact is it going to then have to that bond rate?
Can I chime
Go
in
ahead,
with
please.
a reply to that? Because you and I were in the initial meeting with her.
Yeah.
I think her concern really centered more around doing a larger dollar figure and getting it done over a quicker period of time. Not so much the annual jump, but actually what it would look like. Let's say that you took in whatever dollar figure it is we're ultimately going to wind up doing, and we did it over the course of 3 years. At the end of 3 years, even if you didn't increase your tax rate, which we wouldn't, it would look like a tax increase because, we're still using a low enough dollar figure that we can extend this over the course of time, being very careful and cognizant of the fact that, there's not much of a fluctuation. I mean, if I handed you $113 versus $66, you're going to see a huge difference. If I went home and looked at my own personal tax bill, I'm probably not going to notice this too much. So I think her bigger concern was taking the total that we were going to do, moving it to a shorter period of time. Again, let's use 3 years, and at the end of 3 years it drops to 0, and then it looks like a huge tax increase when in fact it wasn't. And we still, if we do this over the course of 5, 6, 7, 8 years, watching and being cognizant of the fact that our costs are going up, we're still going to see that go from, we're still going to see an increase, although it's going to be minute in comparison to, an average of, let's say, $100 a year. And then as far as being able to say what other districts, what other experience might you have with other districts, everything I've read, nobody's doing this because nobody has fund balance. Or those that do are actually keeping it because there are schools out there that have larger balances.
I think last year when we approved the 500, we sort of threw out the 750. We discussed the potential 750 for this year. Is there any way of forecasting what we might be able to do next year? Does it look like there will be an opportunity?
Can I take that
Is this
one,
something
too?
that we might, or is it just too early
Something
to
you
tell?
guys discussed?
Right,
in the
I'll
finance
take that one
committee?
as well. When we did the 500 last year, the conversation centered around 500,000 for this, 250,000 for the UPS refund, and then there was another 250,000. I think it was. I think it had to relate to the teacher contract because we were going to bring everybody up comparison to other feeder schools around us. So all in all, that came out to pretty close to we estimated $1 million, and then at the end of the year, during our budget proceeding, we showed cost versus budget as being somewhat equal. The reality is, at the end of the year, I think we still pumped in $400,000 into our fund balances. So that's why we felt very comfortable taking that number up to 750 this year. And the best I think we can tell you is that somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million would be what we probably come forward with, you know, next year.
Okay.
And I know that's a huge swing, but
And if I could just add, I know that the numbers are really conservative.
right.
She's really good about going the worst case scenario all
Right,
the time.
right.
So I feel pretty confident with the page.
And another piece of information that we don't have right now is typically in a triennial year, we get quite a bump in EAV. Well, this is a new day, and we will know that by next year. And so there's not just us, but every district is really, you know, wondering what's going to happen because, you know, if it's not what we've experienced historically, then we may look at a more conservative number in the future. If it is better than we think, then 750,000 maybe even too conservative.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, so, Nora, a question I had asked last year, and this is out of memory, so I don't remember exactly the details, was around the idea that, you know, does it make more sense to abate the tax in the current present year versus do the equivalent, I don't remember the word, I think it's disbursement or something, basically the equivalent of paying down your mortgage debt, right? So in other words, to benefit future years, right, versus basically taking out of your money out of your pocket and giving it back to, right, giving it back to everybody. And at the time, I recall, and I don't recall the exact numbers, I think Elizabeth had said that it really depended upon the prevailing bond rate, and I kind of asked for, well, is there a point at which it kind of would make sense for us? And I said, could you give it, you know, maybe a number based on LIBOR or some other factor that we could say, gauge to say whether this made sense or not. At the time, and again, this is a fuzzy recollection, I don't remember whether she used LIBOR or what she used, but said, well, if it got down to about 4.5%, that would probably be when it would make sense. I'm sitting, you know, here thinking, I can't imagine that bond rates are ever going to go much lower than they are. I mean, unless we get to a point where people are actually paying you to take their money. What
would you, let's see, I don't know if this is answering the question specifically, but I'm thinking that in this day and age, if you have money and you want to pay down your outstanding debt,
right.
You're going to, there's a cost for doing that if you want to take all the money and set it aside in an escrow account. And if you're paying 4.5%, you're only going to earn 0.05%. So you actually have to put that much more money aside because you got to pay for interest during that time. That's what we call negative carry in our industry. And you cannot really technically pay off those bonds. You're just paying the debt service, but the bonds aren't called in. Each one of your bond issues may or may not, just think if I have it, you know, may or may not have a call date. And as you get closer to the call date, that might be something to consider, taking some of the money and paying off the principal, so that you save on the interest. And that's something that, you know, the call date is not close on any of the bonds. In other words, not within the next couple of years. I think some of your bonds are callable in 2015. And so that might be something that, you know, options you can look at as you move towards calendar year 2015.
Okay, and would it generally be more advantageous, so maybe I misunderstood what she was saying, but would it be more advantageous to do it in a higher yield environment or a lower yield environment, right?
If short-term rates are higher, it may be more advantageous because when you take the money and set it aside for bond payments, you're actually earning money on that money. So that may be what she was referring to, but not knowing exactly.
Yeah, and my recollection is a little fuzzy too. It just seems, I remember it a little bit differently, and it seems to me that maybe it was in the other direction, that as yields rise, it made more sense to consider that.
I think that's it, because again, you're not going to earn anything on your money,
Right.
but you take the money and put it in an escrow account, and you have to purchase securities at that time.